Welcome back, it's me, Lou. I'm here for another action figure review. Today from McFarlane Toys, in the Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim line, we are featuring the Build-A-Figure Snow Troll. Alright, so the day is finally here. I'm going to assemble the Snow Troll from the War of the Rohirrim toy line. So there are 4 figures in the line. Each figure had a specific piece. You know, there was the head, the torso, the arms, and the lower legs, or the lower torso and legs. And now that I have all the pieces together, we can finally assemble the figure. I was a huge fan, as always, when it came to this film. This came out last year. I think it was last year. Was it earlier this year? But yeah, I loved the Lord of the Rings, the War of the Rohirrim film. It's a beautiful animated feature. And if you're a fan of both anime and The Lord of the Rings, it's definitely worth a viewing. You know, every time I watch this film, I just adore it more and more. You know, the artwork's amazing. The story's decent. It's not the greatest, but it's entertaining, and the action is just awesome. So, beautiful film. If you haven't checked it out, you know, it's really worth at least one viewing. All right, so here we are. We're going to assemble our Snow Troll, which we see right here. So this is the animated character that we see in the film. And the toy looks awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And like I said, it belonged to the War of the Rohirrim toy line, which the line itself was priced pretty high. You know, you're paying $20 for each figure, which is ridiculous. But I got mine on clearance, and I'm so glad, I did, because this was a toy line I really wanted to pull the trigger on, but, you know, when it first came out, the price point was just way too high. All right, so with that being said, let's get moving and put together our Snow Troll. All right, so before we do, let's take a look at the pieces. Here is the upper torso, the chest, nicely sculpted. Beautiful wash and dry brushing to really bring out the skin texture. There's also some contrast because with the leather straps, you know, they're just plain brown. You know, there's not a lot of whole detailing painted onto them. And then the back's more of the same. You know, the detailing is what you expect from a McFarlane figure. It's really high. The head looks very, very cool. Yeah, the horns. Nice ridges sculpted along the surface. Long beard. The teeth could have been done a little bit better in terms of the paint and the sculpting, but it's decent. And then you can see the eyes right there. The arms look nice. The one arm has the pauldron on top. I kind of feel like they could have went the extra mile and at least painted the spikes silver and maybe added some dry brushing to the pauldron to give it a little bit more realism. You know, much like they did with the wrist and the chain, or the cuffs and the chains. But again, nice texture, nice paint application, much like the torso. You know, you have some washes and dry brushing effects going on. And then the lower torso and the legs, nice scaly texture. You know, kind of almost resembles like elephant skin towards the lower legs. And then you kind of have the skirt piece. Alright, let's get assembling. So, it seems pretty self-explanatory. You know, you marry the two halves together. I make sure first I don't mess this up. Alright, so this is going to go in afterward. So let's put these two together. Very satisfying snap. Attach it to the legs. It doesn't snap into place, but, I mean, it does snap into place, but you're not going to hear a loud click. You can just kind of feel that it plugs in. The arms, you know, simple ball joint and socket. Now, the biggest disappointment for me with this toy line is that the figure scale was small. The figures are barely over 4 inches. And it was kind of perplexing because McFarlane's other anime lines, you know, their figures range anywhere between 6 to 7 inches in scale. And this smaller scale just didn't feel right. Because if you watch the film, the characters are just so beautifully designed. It would have been nice if they did them justice and produced the figures at that 6 or 7 inch scale, to really bring out the details. And it would have been even better, if the Build-A-Figure was a larger scale also. Because I think they could have really just sold the line on the Build-A-Figure, especially with people that aren't fans of Lord of the Rings. If they made a snow troll that was in the same size as like the DC figures or the movie Maniacs or the anime stuff, fans would have just bought this up. And then here's the head, simply plugs in. It's a very loose fitting socket, but that does the job. So we have our awesome looking snow troll here. Slightly disappointed that at this scale that you figure they'd give him more articulation. The legs are not articulated, surprisingly. Although it looks like it, they do not move. You only have movement at the waist, the head, and then the arms. Unfortunately, the wrists do not swivel at all. There's no knee or elbow articulation. The arms just simply move up and outward. But overall, it's a nice looking behemoth of a figure. He's much, much larger than the other figures in the line. He comes in at only about 6 1/4 inches to the top of the horns. If you're into the Spawn figures, if you wanted to, you could easily migrate this into the Spawn line. And then just say it's a demon, that works for like the Violator or Boglia. And then here it is next to a McFarlane Spawn. So it feels like it would feel in place with like certain toy lines. Here's Batman. Here's a smaller 6 inch scale Raiden from the Mezco Mortal Kombat 10 line. Marvel Legends. Yeah, it seems like it'd feel at home with some of these other toy lines. I just wish it was larger. But yeah, it's a cool figure. Very stoked to finally being able to put them together. That's like one of the weird gratifying things for me. It's like, like any toy line that has a Build-A-Figure, it's always, you always hit with that gratification once you have all the pieces, and then you finally put the figure together, and when it meets your expectations, it's kind of like very fulfilling. And this one, it fell a little bit short in terms of the articulation and the size, but seeing them pieced together, I'm really glad I have them. I think it's awesome. And here he is next to the other figures in the toy line. You can see how much larger he is than the other characters in the film. So, yeah, it's cool. This toy line, it has its pros and cons. If you're a fan of Lord of the Rings and anime, it's worth buying. But, you might be turned away by the short, small size of the figures. And the price point alone is ridiculous. Each figure alone is like $20 a pop. But I was very fortunate because my local Walmart had these clearanced for only $5 each. So I couldn't resist. I had to get them. So if you're on the hunt for these, just shop around, check eBay, check Facebook Marketplace, or even check your local Walmart. You never know. If you can find these clearance, pull the trigger. It's really worth it, especially to build this big brute right here. It's awesome. All right, so with that being said, let's wrap this one up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I'll see you at the next one. All right, later.